what's up, guys? It's your boy Chris coming at you with another episode to the Beautiful Struggle podcast. This is episode 9, and we're just gonna jump straight into it today. Today, I have my stepfather on. Um, he got a really interesting and very interesting perspective on life and point of view. He's currently a police officer in Northern California. So, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. If you want, you can go ahead and we can just jump into it, and you can tell the people about your history and the police academy and this job that you're doing.
The police academy, huh? There's different ways that people get into the career of law enforcement as far as the entry portion of it from the academy aspect. For me, it was a little different probably than the average. You can go to, say, for instance, a 5-6 month academy, or you can go to an extended version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I ultimately wind up going through an extended version of that. And so I did that while I was raising kids and working and going to the academy at night. So it was an interesting experience for me. Definitely eye-opening, and definitely a challenge to work towards the goal that I wanted to get to. Law enforcement is a hard career or a hard field to get into. A lot of people don't make it into the field the first time based on all the checks and balances and hoops you have to jump through and testing and all the things involved. So for some it's harder than others based on their background, what they've been involved in, their age, their maturity. I mean, there's so many things that come into play with it. But for me personally, I had to go through some trials and tribulations, getting into this job. But I found it to be something I was really interested in and that I wanted to get into. And
What age did you know that you found it interesting and something that you wanted to jump into?
it was kind of an interesting way of happening. I think as a young man in high school, I probably had a typical mentality that some people had, or even have this day, where cops aren't cool and that kind of a thing. Just on a fluke, I had a school resource officer who knew me, thought I was a good kid, saw me walking home from football practice one day and pulled me aside and asked me if I wanted a job. And he was working a part of a program. There was actually a police activity league, which back then at that department was called youth activity league instead. So basically, a long story short is that I became the only non-sworn employee, working with other officers and working with kids. We would go on field trips, sports activities, things of that nature, and that was my entry into law enforcement. And it was probably something I would have never found on my own, something that I would have never been interested in doing, just based on some of the stigma behind it and all those things.
Yeah.
So
what were some of the stigmas back then as growing up? What were some of the stigmas behind getting into law enforcement, especially in the area that you grew up in specifically?
I think that on some level, kids hop on the bandwagon with certain situations. There's peer pressure, and there's just other things that you're used to. And when we were growing up, the police were pigs. Police ruin things. They take people to jail. Just a lot of the stuff that goes on, even today, that people get caught up in. And a lot of times they don't know the honest truth behind why things happen. They know individuals personally and know one side of a story and buy into that story. And there's really no buy-in for most people to want to know the officer's side of the story in the first place. So I think that in some ways there's no difference now than there was years ago, when I was a teenager, when it came to the thought about police and what police were about and that kind of a thing. I never even really had a personal negative experience as a young person, as a teenager. But even then, it doesn't even take that. Sometimes it's just merely you hearing a story or you buying into someone else's situation,
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with that. I think there's not a whole lot of difference between, well, I can't speak about back in the days, but especially now, the mentality that people feel, how they feel about, people in law enforcement. I know for myself, I had that mentality when I was young. Like
Hmm.
when I first met you, and I heard you were a cop, I was like, what's up with that? Like, I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
Um, so it is a very interesting mentality to have, and to come out of and look back at it like, okay, why was I thinking like that? And it's typically because of what other people are thinking, like what the
Hmm.
masses is thinking. And like you said, people usually don't take the time to look at the police officer's point of view.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess sometimes I would even ask myself, why would someone go out of their way to care about what my situation is as an individual in this career? Because there's so many more people out there than there are officers, right? So there's so much more to look at in a situation when it comes to the everyday person, your next door neighbor, a friend, the people who you know, and so you buy into their situation as opposed to what the officers is, and you take sides and things like that. So, I mean, I think the biggest problem, and it'll continue to be a problem, is this us against them type of mentality, and that causes a lot of issues. I try and steer away from that, and there are officers who do that. But when you get attacked back in the other direction, it becomes easy for you to fall into us versus them mentality when it shouldn't be, because people who do this job, who are in this career, are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They have families, they have friends, they deal with everyday life situations, and there's so many people who look at us as robots and only see us as having a certain type of mentality or being a certain type of individual. So I hope, I guess, in having this conversation, that if nothing else, I kind of won you over, not only as an individual maybe, but in my professional sense also, knowing who I am, how I apply to things that I do in my job, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, since I met you, you're probably one of the few people that's really challenged me and challenged the way I've thought and challenged the way I operate throughout my daily life. And you always make me think, right? And I think that's
Hmm.
very important to have that person on your side in your inner circle,
Right.
even if you don't talk to that person every day.
Hmm.
Just to have those conversations. And one of the things that I remember talking to you about, and you brought up to me a concept. Um, Basically, what do you think would happen if we went 24 hours without law enforcement?
Hmm.
Go ahead and talk about that. And why, your mentality bringing that up. Your thoughts.
you know, I mean, simply put, it seems like to a lot of people, the police are the enemy until you need them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I could have someone today I see in the street curse me out, and tomorrow they call me to their home for an issue, and they treat me completely different because now they need me.
Have you had
Um,
that happen to you?
Absolutely had that happen to me.
Okay.
I mean, there's been hundreds of scenarios where I could, play out different situations like that. Um, I think what goes on in those types of situations is that, again, you get people who don't people don't have an officer in their life on a regular everyday basis. All they know the person who shows up in uniform, who's clean cut, militaristic looking, and they're not a person who's personable. They're not relatable. They don't identify with that. So it's really hard to be able to feel like you're on that person's level, that they're a human being, and whatnot. So I think that a lot of times I'll tell people that I'm only one career away from having a different mentality. And what I mean by it is, over the course of the years where I've seen the Occupy movement and um, hands up, don't shoot, and I mean, they go on and on, right? Um, there's only one career that separated me from potentially being that person, because the things that we feed into nowadays and see the media, so on and so forth, those things are glamorized. And a lot of times they're fueled by half truths, things that people really don't know about. People don't take the time to research things on their own and find out whether something really happened that way, and care to know enough about it. So, um, I think that in the midst of all the things that you and I've talked about when it comes to those types of things, it's probably easier talking to someone who's more open-minded
Mm-hmm.
about those types of
Yeah.
situations. There's been plenty of people who I start the conversation. It takes me, you know, 30 seconds to figure out if it's going in one ear or out the other, or whether or not we're actually going to have a mature conversation, or whether or not I'm talking to a wall, and I choose what direction I go from there with that individual. But, and I laughingly have to admit, what was the original question you asked me? I'm kind of.
No, you good. It's, by the way, it's 12 o'clock at night. It's been a long day. We've been out here, well, he's been out here working a lot. But, I brought up the time that you brought up to me about going 24 hours without law
Right.
enforcement.
So, people talk about how horrible things are. They're feeling about the police brutality, all the things going on, and and when you really think about it, if everybody was aware for 24 hours the police weren't around, it's kind of like the Purge movie, right?
Purge,
It's
exactly.
already happened on a certain
Yeah.
level. But I mean, would you feel safe to go out in the streets? Do you think the world would run like it normally does? We put law enforcement into effect for a certain reason, obviously, or unfortunately. There's people out there who just are not good individuals. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Even though you would like to have the best view of everyone out there and believe that everyone's positive and that there wouldn't be any issues, but there's some nasty people out there, unfortunately. And so, some people look at the police as necessarily evil, if you will. I think there's more officers out there who have good personalities, good morals, good ethics, good intent than people realize, aside from the things you see in social media and stuff like that. So, I mean, it really takes somebody sitting and thinking about that.
Yeah. And the reason why we had that conversation and he brought that up to me is again to challenge how I think. And if you really sit here and think about going without law enforcement for 24 hours, how it would literally look like the movie The Purge. It would be absolutely insane. And we bring that up because there's people out there that are always like, F the police, we don't need the police and all that. But like you said earlier, when you need help, when you're in need of help, or your mother's in need of help, but you saying F the police, you're still gonna be saying that when your mom needs help, your sister needs help,
Right.
So, how do you feel when people? I know at this point maybe you're immune to it. When people say F the police, I see it all the time. It's kind of, it's almost embarrassing to me when I see it because it's people I know, and I even know people that are, no lie, that are literally monetizing those words.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate to see that, and it's like, I just want to be like, bro, come on, like, you know what I'm saying?
It's difficult because I'll take you back to a time when, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, and, we were kind of the beginning of hip hop, if you will. And so there were several developing years of hip hop, from the days of Run DMC to the days of gangster rap to this, that, and the other. And one group that I enjoyed and idolized as a kid was NWA.
Yeah.
There was some negativity, naturally, that was a part of the lyrics of that group, or the way I would look at it as some negativity. But there was something that we chanted and talked about, and one of their more famous songs is "Fuck the Police." And as a kid, I enjoyed that song. And to be honest with you, because I grew up on it, if it came on today, I wouldn't run over and turn it off and be disgusted by it, because the job I do, it's just, to me, I look at it differently because of the era I grew up in and the way that I embraced the song at that time. But the point, though, going back and looking at it, is that that's an exact example. I didn't have any personal reason to have any issue with the police, but that was even bred in me back then as a young kid, just based on the music that I listened to. And then, when people sometimes listen to music, watch movies, and do other things, they start to live that life, or they start to believe the things that they're hearing, or the song plays enough times, right? It becomes a chant, and it's something that's in your mind. So, it's funny kind of giving that example of it. But I always want to tell people that I'm humanistic. I get it, right? I see some things that people get upset about. The problem is that a lot of times we can't sit and have mature conversations about these things. It's always one-sided, or it's always two people fighting against each other. And as long as we have that, we're going to continue to have these issues. You
Yeah.
know. Yeah. So I mean, it's an uphill battle. When I hear people say it, yeah, I am kind of desensitized to it. It depends on what the scenario is and what the situation and why it happens. But yeah, it bounces off me a lot of times. Does it mean that it doesn't become frustrating at times? No. But you know, it also depends on the individual that it comes from. You know, if I know a certain thing about them, or I've dealt with them in the past, and they tend to be an unsavory person, or whatever the case may be, it might bother me a little bit less than if I feel like it was a more law-abiding person who I felt like truly made the comment because they hated me. Like, you know, there was something going on that caused them to make that comment, and have to reflect and think about, you know, what I had done to make, you know, to bring that out of them. So, you know, it really is scenario based sometimes also. Yeah.
For sure. Man, another area that you always challenge me in is making sure that I educate myself and I get my information from multiple sources and not just getting it from social media, whereas the majority of us get our information from.
Right.
To you, how important is it to go out and do your own research and making sure you're getting the correct information and I guess forming your own opinion and not just going with the masses?
Yeah. You know, you're truly a fool if you don't. Simply put. You know, again, sometimes, even though I still feel young, there's other times where I feel old. You know, we grew up as kids in the era where we didn't have internet. You really had to go hunt some things down and get into some books and different things like that to find things out.
You had to literally go to the library.
Right. And also, certain kind of propaganda or certain information wasn't spread as easy. Also, so we're dealing with, you know, a few different issues and problems at hand. However, you know, with this age of the internet, it became a point in time where I even had seen some things on the internet and thought things were true, and I started learning that there was like this fake news out there where you had legitimate looking news sites, and so sometimes people are doing some research and they're still getting bad information. You know, so, you know, the point of, you know, looking into several different avenues to find your information and not just leaning on one is very important. Who are you getting the information from? What credibility is there, you know, in it? Does it, just because it is a credible news station, does that mean the information is right? I tell people that drama sells, not necessarily the truth. Drama is entertaining. The truth always isn't. A police officer shooting somebody is entertaining in this world today, not the guy who's helping somebody down the street. You know, when do you see those stories?
Yeah,
you know.
And not to cut you off, you always bring up, you know, every time I see you, it's typically another incident that just happened with quote unquote police brutality and all that.
Right.
And you always tell me, hey, did you see the whole clip?
Right.
Did you see the whole video? Did you get the backstory? Did you see what that person was doing? How did they present themselves? You know?
Yep.
And ever since we would always have that conversation, it's like every time I see something else in the news, for me, I always got to see, hey, what was that person doing? And am I seeing the whole story? Am I seeing the whole video?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. You know, and I gotta make it very apparent in the midst of us having this conversation that I by no means am just pro police. I'm not here to be an advocate for every officer out there, because everybody's not doing the job right. Right. As long as you have human beings doing the job, there's always going to be some kind of inherent issue involved in that. Problem is based on the job that we do, lives can be taken, people can be hurt, their liberties can be taken from them. So we tend to be in the forefront of, you know, media a lot of times. But I by no means am an advocate to every officer out there, because there are sometimes where people don't do the right thing they should do. Problem I have with it is that when, you know, the rest of everyone else who is in the career field is in a situation where they're looked at as that individual, even though there's 1 million officers in the United States, you know, you let one do something wrong and then everybody's wrong. You know, that's typically the way our job is, unfortunately, and that's the hard part of it. That really is a difficult part of it because you would like to be your own individual. It becomes a pretty common situation for me when I come into contact with somebody and it off the bat is negative and something comes out of their mouth to the effect of, you guys this or you guys that or you guys did this to me last time, and I'll try and stop it and go, look, let's start over because you never met me and I'm not you guys because I don't know what you're talking about, and try and start off on a different leg. And I think that it's up to you as a professional to try and direct and control that situation, because you are the professional there in that situation. I don't want to say that the person you're dealing with is not a professional. However, at that very moment in the midst of your job, you are the professional. You are expected to control what direction that situation goes, and you can either fuel that fire or you can help to direct that conversation down a different path, a different lane. And so that's the way that I try and address it. Again, like I spoke of earlier, it only takes a short period to figure out whether or not somebody's open to that. But as an individual, me doing a job, I have to be open to that and know that that person could have actually legitimately been wronged. And I have to be open to understanding that.
Gotcha.
And who I can be perceived as being at that very moment, and try and redirect that and give them a feeling that that's not everyone, and make them feel comfortable with dealing with me in that situation. So
the other day, Morgan and I were talking, and she asked me a really interesting question. She basically said, at what age, okay, so since our children are going to be mixed children, she's black, Puerto Rican, mixed children, she said, at what age do you think we're going to have that conversation to them about how to act, like in the streets, how to act with police officers, being that they're going to be mixed children?
Right.
How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts about that? Because I'll tell you my answer. I was like, I think I want to let them know as soon as possible how to act and how to address and how to talk to another human being.
Right.
And I think if you start it young and you address it young, they'll know how to properly carry themselves. If something happens, if they get pulled over, they'll know how to react and act to it. How do you feel about that? Or do you feel like Go ahead. You tell me.
That's a hot topic too, right?
Yeah.
I've heard people say, why do I have to warn my black children, or why do I have to teach my black or African American children to watch themselves around the police? The police are the ones who should have to police themselves or watch themselves. And I totally agree with that. I think that a lot of the way people feel about that, again, is fueled by the things that go on in the media and whatnot nowadays. Am I going to sit here and tell you that the police have not killed black people? No. But I think the hot topic becomes just that, because nothing else gets brought into it. When's the last time you saw a newscast or a news story about a police officer killing a white person? It happens all the time. And I'm not saying it because we go out there and murder people all the time. I'm just saying in the midst of the million officers who do this job every day in the United States, that's going to happen based on the way that we have to police the streets, and depending on how severe the situation is. So with that question being asked, I think what gets portrayed is that the police are just out murdering young black males or young black people, and that's the first issue.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I didn't want to. When she asked me that, it occurred to me that I don't want to instill in my child that the police, they're evil and they're out doing this. That's not what I want to instill in them. Right. But I do want to instill in them like how to act and how to, what's the word I'm looking for? How to present themselves. Again, to use that.
Right. Yeah, you want your kids to be respectable and be able to have mature civil conversations, and act the way that you would expect them to act if they were at home, talking in front of their grandmother or anybody else who you would want them to respect. So I think that ultimately what the situation becomes is that, for me, with anyone, regardless of what the race is, there needs to be some communication as to how to conduct yourself, period. Because that would roll over into if you ever came into a situation with dealing with the police, right? I tell people in my day and age of growing up, not that it was that long ago, but being 43 years old, um, I really didn't have a cross thing to say to an adult, let alone a police officer, because that's the way I was raised, and a lot of people were raised that way. And so we've kind of gotten away from respect and the way we do things, and that kind of thing as a community and society in general. And I understand that if I told somebody, well, it's no different. The conversation with a white kid is no different than a black kid, or there's no difference at all, that people would jump on me all day long about that, right? Because I think there are some obvious differences, and it's something that has to be paid attention to, and that we need to be aware of. But at the end of the day, the only real conversation that you need to have is being respectable. If you're dealing with the police, compliance, listening to what you've been told to do. There is a lot of authority that comes into play with the job that I do. But people have put me in that position because it's necessary to control the evils and the problems that that we have. I legitimately feel like I wish that I could be out of a job. I wish there was not a need for police, and I had to find something else to do. And I sincerely mean that. But unfortunately, we don't live in that type of a world. We don't live in that type of a country or a type of a state or a city.
Explain that for the people, because I think you went over that pretty quick, and I don't think people caught that and what you really mean by that.
I truly and legitimately wish that I was out of a job, that I had to find something else to do because there was no longer tomorrow a need for police officers. I mean, how great would that be, right? I don't look at myself as necessarily evil, because I know the way that I do my job and the type of professional that I am. However, we are necessary, unfortunately. We carry a gun on our side, unfortunately, because of the type of people we deal with. We don't live in a society where I can go out and police the city without having a weapon, because what good would I be then? If you called me, what good would I be to the force of the evil or the issue that you're having? If it's a dangerous one, it wouldn't really be a need to call the police at that point, would there? You got to think about the things that are combined in what we do, the powers that you give us, why I carry a weapon, and why I enforce things the way that I do. And a weapon's not always involved. I'm just bringing up, the ugly side, you will, of the job that we do. And so, these conversations obviously can go on forever about the things that happen with police and use of force and the way people view those types of things. The job that we do is not a pretty one all the time. I think that what people don't realize is that a greater majority of officers in the entirety of their career, and I would want to say, without knowing the numbers, that the average police career is 20 to 30 years. That the majority of officers in their career will never shoot their weapon. I'm not saying they won't pull it out, but aside from training, they will never shoot their weapon. They will never shoot a person. The first thing I get kids ask me who are, police are cool and they want to talk to you and whatever else. Have you ever shot anybody? No. And my answer is, I hope I never have to. People don't realize the majority of law enforcement, I want to say 90+% of officers will never be involved in the shooting where they have to shoot an individual. And I think that's a pretty good number, is given what's actually sold to people on a regular basis, right? What's fed to us is you would think that officers are going out shooting at people all day, every day. I've been in law enforcement for 20 plus years, and I've never shot anybody. And it's not because I work in areas where there's nothing going on. It just hasn't happened. Have I been around officers who had to shoot someone or work for agencies where that's happened? Of course. But again, when you look at the percentage of it and what goes on, we really, as a society, build this up to something that it's not. And I hate talking numbers with people, because a lot of times you lose people when you talk to them about percentages and numbers, and it seems like you're trying to, preach to them and lecture to them about situations. But that's when that stuff comes up, that we talk about. Hey, research on your own and figure some of this stuff out. Start asking some of these questions and figuring things out. We have a Citizens of Police Academy at the police department, and there's the police department I work for, and there's a lot of agencies to try and do that. And what it is to try and educate the public on what we really do from the inside out. And people get blown away when they see how we actually do things, why we do things, the policies involved, what really happens on the inside. Officers actually having situations where internal affairs investigations um, are looked at, and officers lose their jobs and things like that. People don't realize it because all they hear or see is that officers are getting away with murder out there, right?
Yeah.
But people get blown away by it, and in the citizens police academies, we have people come out and hop in some of our armored vehicles and go out to the range and shoot a taser, a taser weapon, and just see how all these things work. And people, it's a real eye-opening situation to the point where we've even had some naysayers who have actually gone to the Citizens Police Academy because they wanted to be that person in the back room pointing their finger and questioning the whole time. And even that person gets turned around and goes, wow, I really didn't know that.
Isn't there a program that you guys have where you put that person in a situation and they have to react to different scenarios? Or is that only for the police officers?
So there's a potential that within the Citizens Police Academy that could happen, right? And they're not as often as we would like them to be, and it takes a lot of manpower and personnel to be able to put on a course like that. But a citizen could potentially go through a scenario situation where they are exposed to that type of situation. It would be nice, and generally speaking, if people every day could go through that kind of stuff, right? To drive a car, you have to have a driver's license. To do this, you have to have a license for that, or something for that. It would be nice if by the time 18 came around, people had to have some kind of training or knowledge or information as to what the police do. It sounds kind of sad when you think about it, if I put it in that perspective, that people need to be trained up on what the police do. I'm not looking at it or suggesting that people need to watch out for me. But because we're having the problems that we're having, and there's the perceived issues that are going on, I think the best way to deal with those types of situations would be to educate people. And if something was in effect that required someone to have some exposure to the police, some of the training that goes on, things like that, there may be some better understanding.
For sure.
Yeah.
Have you been in a situation where maybe unfortunately one of your colleagues have went about a situation that you didn't agree with? And how did you, if you did, how did you handle it?
Yeah, I think that that's a hard situation, obviously, right? Working with co-workers, there's this belief and thought about the Blue Brotherhood, or I've heard different people make comments about the fact that police are going to support each other. It doesn't matter if they do dirt or whatever else. Could that happen? Without a doubt. I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that couldn't happen. Are there officers out there who are going to check the next guy if he's doing the wrong thing? Absolutely. Have I ever been in that situation? Absolutely. And it depends on the severity of it. In one situation, I can really need to pull someone aside and go, hey, do you want to talk about something? What happened with that? Why did that go down that way? It could be a situation where right at that very moment, I interject and stop them from what they're doing and take it over, and then have that conversation later on. Or it could be something that's bad enough to where it's not even worth having a conversation with that person, and it needs to go to the next level, or supervisor or something of that nature.
So in that situation where you have to interject and step in, was there ever a situation where it was like ego clashing, and maybe they didn't want to step at it? They're like, no, I got this, or whatever they're doing.
I personally haven't dealt with that. I think there's a way to approach and address a situation without allowing the other person to save face, if you will. And that's probably the best way to do it. What happens behind closed doors or behind the scenes is a whole nother situation. And I don't want to walk around it. You asked me a specific question. Have I ever had to deal with that? Yes. Has it ever been so bad that I felt like someone's rights were violated, or that a crime was committed and I just swept it under a rug or turned my head the other way or allowed it to happen? No. It could be a situation where a conversation gets heated. Someone's gotten under the officer's skin to the point to where the officer is getting heated and upset. That can happen. We do this job all day, every day. People want us to be, the psychologist, the doctor, the family counselor, the on and on and on. And we're human beings. You know, we have our breaking point also on a certain level, regardless of whether or not we're professionals. People think that we're um, not humans, and so you know, if something like that happens, and that has happened before, I've had the ability to be able to step in, you know, play, you know, how do you say, the good cop, bad cop kind of a thing. I wouldn't want to play that role with the other officer, but be able to step in, try the approach or conversation from a different perspective, you know, fresh person, right? Let's have a new conversation, and then determine whether or not that's an ongoing problem with that officer, if it's just a, you know, or if it's just a solo incident, and you know, and help that officer out with that situation. So yeah, I've dealt with it before.
Got you, got you. One of the other questions I had to kind of go back to the us versus them
Hmm.
situation. What are some of the things that you believe you guys can do to bridge that gap? And what are some of the things that you guys are currently doing to bridge that gap? If you guys are even trying to do that.
You know, I think those attempts happen on many different levels. I for years have been involved in the police activity league. I have a special love for it based on how I got into law enforcement. A lot of people who I'm around at work and otherwise know how I got into law enforcement, and so I've been involved for years in the police activity league. I think that the best place to start is with the youth. Um,
Educating them?
yeah, educating them. I expose myself to the youth in and out of uniform. I think it's important to do both, but making them comfortable with you in uniform and being a human being and having reasonable conversations with them when it's not in an enforcement type of a situation.
I believe that because I know when we see officers in uniform,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people get intimidated and they're like they don't really know how to act.
Right.
They kind of, you know, I don't know. They just don't know how to act. You know,
Right.
even if they're not doing anything bad, it's just there's some intimidating factor there.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very important to make sure that your officers in your department take opportunities to have interactions and contacts with people in a non-enforcement type of a scenario situation. So people don't always look at it as, hey, if the police shows up, something always goes wrong. If the police show up, someone is always going in handcuffs. If the police show up, it's always all bad, right? So how do we do that on different levels? Again, bring up the PAL program. The Police Citizens Academy. We've had, you know, coffee with a cop, which happens a lot of times across the United States even now. You know, every year I run a police motorcycle competition, having been a motorcycle officer in the past, and it's a community event. It's a big event. Officers come out and ride motorcycles. People love motorcycles. Doesn't matter if it's kids, men, women, whatever the case may be. It's an ability for us to get the public out to interact with us. You know, once a year when it happens, before the event starts at our local mall, we go in, put the motorcycles on kickstands, allow the kids to hop on a motorcycle, play with the lights, and take pictures and do all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, you know, this is a small percentage of giving you an example of the things that happen, the things that go on, not just in my agency, but I'm just talking about one agency, right? And I'm just giving you a small handful of the many things that happen, but these are the efforts that are made on a regular, everyday basis.
And it's kind of unfortunate because these are not things. I don't see it on the news very often. Is what I'm trying to say. It's not things that you see that
Right.
police officers are out there doing.
Right.
What you see is police officers killing black people. That's
Right.
what you basically see, which is unfortunate. And I know we've had this conversation before. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's like you get 1 minute of negativity and like 10 seconds of positive stuff.
Right. Right.
Or it could be like 3 minutes of negativity and like 10 seconds of positive. You know,
Right.
people don't see these type of things that are really happening. I know I do. I hear you doing a bunch of different things for the neighborhood and the community, and it needs to be more of a light shown on it.
Yeah, definitely. But like I said before, unfortunately, drama sells.
Yeah.
That's entertainment, and I say this jokingly, the newscast, the media, there's nothing selling the fireman pulling the cat out of the tree, or the police officer doing something positive. It's uneventful, unfortunately. So, sometimes we have to be our own advocates. A lot of agencies nowadays, including ours, and I say ours just because I'm not putting a name out there, because I'm not here as an individual to sitting here and have a conversation to represent the department that I work for. I'm just speaking as an officer, but important sometimes to I guess be their own advocate, like I said. So there's social media, Instagram and Facebook and things like that, and photos go on those, and stories and videos and things that are going on in the community, and positive things that officers are doing. And so a lot of times there's departments who make that effort to make sure that it can be seen on in some media outlet, to where people have access to that information and know that those things are going on. How you get the media to do that, I think is a very difficult situation, because like I said, that stuff doesn't sell, and they're trying to sell something. They're a business, and people don't realize that. And it's almost kind of like one of the sayings goes, if it's on the internet, it must be true. People think that, and just because you can find some information on the internet doesn't mean it was the right information.
Right.
Doesn't mean it came from the right person. Doesn't mean it was the right side of the story. In the midst of everything that we talk about, I don't like to try and sit and be the victim. I'm a professional. I chose the career that I do. It's sometimes not an easy one, and I signed up for it. And so there's a lot that comes with it. Do I think that we could do our part as law enforcement to make some efforts and do some things that we need to do, and fix and repair some problems that we have? Absolutely. There are some problems that go on in this career on an everyday basis, and sometimes there has to be mistakes made before you can fix those problems. They have to be brought to light. People have to talk about them. People have to come together professionally as intelligent, mature people, and have these conversations. And until we continue to do that and work together, we won't move anywhere or move forward in those situations.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
How you feeling? 12:30.
I'm good.
You good?
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You also, something else that you've taught me something you've always expressed to me since I've met you and since I've known you, is hustle. You've always taught me, you've always let me know, like, hey, whatever you got going on, you need to have a side hustle. You need to be doing something on the side, whether it's bringing in some type of money, doing something you're passionate about, something.
Right.
Where did that mindset, where does that mentality come from, that you need to have something on the side, something else going, which I totally agree with. Honestly, I tell a lot of people that nowadays. I'll be talking to people. I feel like an OG, like, yo, what you doing right now?
Right.
I think you at least need to have something else going on, like,
Right.
To make you some money, to get you going. Especially if you're striving to be an entrepreneur. I have these conversations with a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And I'm saying people that are younger than me. I know I'm 25, but people that are even younger than me.
I think without you asking, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that a whole lot. I can probably...
Like, was there an OG back in the days that put you on?
I could probably draw that energy from a few different situations. I had a mother who was a single parent, generally speaking, for a good portion of my life, and great mother, good provider, that kind of a thing. And around her years, people didn't go to college as much. They went out into the workforce and hoped they found a good solid job that they could keep and make an honest living, right? And at some point in time, she lost her job, and it created a lot of issues for her because it was what she knew. She was the breadwinner and that kind of a thing. And so I want to say that situations like that for me, personally, just spell to me, make sure you always have a means. Always have a means, because anything can happen. And I've had it brought up to me before that the term, the way that it's put, is the jack of all trades, master of none. You got your hands in everything, you're doing everything, but you're not the master of anything. It depends on what it is you're doing in life. To me, the job in law enforcement, generally speaking, is the jack of all trades, master of none, because people expect us to know and do everything. We got to be great in dealing with the mental health community. And we got to be great in dealing with criminals, and we got to be great in dealing with being family counselors when we show up to the home because people are fighting, and all these things, right? So to
I didn't
me,
even think about it like that, to be honest.
that's the essence of the job that I do. But even before I started that job, I've been employed since I was 14 years old, never been without a job, and there's been multiple times in my life where I've had more than one job at a time, and it just was bred into me. It's just who I am as an individual. I'm not suggesting that everybody has to be that way, but I think that everyone should have a backup. I think that at some point in time, even in the midst of the things that I talk about, you shed light on some things that I have to think about because old dogs can learn new tricks. And other things can be put into perspective, and the other mentality or thought that you gave me and the things that you research is people having this mentality of keeping your eye on the prize. Why have a backup if you are putting your all into your main? I think that the safe route, doing things that are safe and having a backup has always been something that I've known, and that's what's been important. You were raised with, hey, have a job, work hard, invest, in these types of things, and that's what I know. So, with you, there's been some similar things. You got into a clothing line, right? And you had a specific interest. You want to figure out a way to make some money. My other kids, your sister Brianna, she wants to do nails on the side, and one of my daughters, cuts hair on the side, and I used to cut hair when I was in high school as a side hustle, and I just think that it's a good work ethic also, to always know that you have something working for you and not be someone who's sitting back waiting for something to happen, because someone who doesn't have a hustle, to me, is always sitting back waiting for something to happen, because at any given point in time, based on the jobs that we do or have, you cannot have a job tomorrow, and what do you have to fall back on? So for me, that's just a mentality to have. For anyone who would question that or say that you shouldn't, I would want to know what their reasoning is, for it,
sure.
And that kind of a thing. But I draw that from that, and I had a father who who was a trunk hustler. Just like it sounds, what he was. He didn't have a lot of influence in my life, but I watched him hustle things out of the trunk, clothes and eyewear, and the things that maybe you've seen in movies and stuff like that. That's who I knew, when I was younger. Place to place, making moves, doing things, and so a little bit of that is bred in me. I'm not saying that that's the kind of hustle I want to have. However, he was making moves, making things happen.
But you got that hustle spirit in you.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I mean, not to go too deep, but I feel like I have the same thing. With my pops and my mom, like, I remember times that she had multiple jobs when she was making it happen by herself.
Yeah.
And my pops, he was doing what he had to do. So I feel like, I agree with you. Like, maybe you don't want to have that same hustle, but that it's in you. That spirit's in you for sure.
Yeah, and it's a simple situation. I remember being in high school and having a car and looking at people who didn't, and wondering what is it about that person that doesn't inspire them to have a job or do the things they need to do, get a source of transportation, or to do this for themselves, or people who kind of kick back and wait for things to magically happen. It blows my mind. I never really gotten that concept. So it's really simply about that.
Do you believe everybody has the potential to be an entrepreneur?
No, I don't.
Okay.
There are leaders and there's followers, and that falls into life in a lot of different aspects. A person who has a leader mentality doesn't mean that they have to be a leader of anything specifically, or a leader of people, or any of that type of situation. But there are leaders and there are followers. There are people who can do, and there are people who can't, and there's people who, I've seen situations where, small example, guy has his own car washing business, do mobile car washing or whatever, and he shows up to the house and he's got 4 workers with him, and they're hustling their butts off, and the guy who owns the business may be helping a little bit too. He may be BSing with you a little bit while they're working. I sit there and scratch my head and go, on what day of the week would I ever be okay showing up with this dude in his van, washing cars for him when I could be doing this myself? Like, at what given day of the week, what went wrong where, or what is it about that individual that doesn't make them rise, to the point to what this other person have, and it's just not in everybody, right? It just isn't, unfortunately. Can it be taught? Potentially. Some people don't naturally have it in them. It can be taught. Some people will never have it, just because it's not within them, period. Some people just need to be educated, simply.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm in the middle with it, honestly. I think, man, it's kind of hard to say. My thing is, if you're around the right people, you can make it happen.
Absolutely.
To me, like, I've been learning that over the last maybe 7 months. I'm trying to put myself in a position where I'm around the correct people. And I think that in itself will help. No matter where you're at in life, I think it'll help bring you up a lot further. Just by doing this one thing, just surrounding yourself with the correct people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just kind of as a side note to that, I think there's a lot of BS and drama that goes on in social media, Instagram, Facebook, other outlets. But it's entertaining, and there's also information that you learn and find from those things, which is why I don't completely separate myself from them. I'm not a person, personally, I'm not an individual who buys into the motivation provided by someone else. There's individuals who have courses where they have speeches and they talk to people, and they're looked at as inspirational motivators and things like that. I don't really buy into that. I feel like I have to be my own motivation. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but at the end of the day, when I look at those situations, as far as those things go, there's been times where I've seen memes and different things where they talk about, I'm sure you've probably seen them, where it'll say, if you're not surrounded by people who motivate you or who uplift you, you need to let them go, or why are they around you, and those types of things. And I totally believe in that. 'Cause people will drag you down. You have to be surrounded by the right people, the right support, whether it's family or friends. Sometimes family are not always the right ones. Sometimes friends are. People believe just because they're family, they're going to do the right thing for you, and that's not true by any means. And you have to be able to discern and figure out who those people are for your camp. And I think first and foremost, you have to, as an individual, though, be your own motivation, because if you're dependent on someone else, you're going to get let down.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. We laugh and talk, and you've been around me. I can talk your ear off if it's about a certain situation. In other situations, I'm totally quiet. It depends on what interests me and what we're talking about, and whether or not it's productive. But I think that ultimately, as we were speaking about already, when it comes to certain individuals, it's got to be in you on some level. And if it's not naturally in you, you at least have to show some interest, right? Because you can only lead a horse to water, as they say. You can't make them drink. So you got to have some interest off the top, to even get to that level in the first place. And entrepreneurship is not an easy situation. There's some ups and downs and heartaches and hard work that goes into that, and I'm sure you've learned that as I've watched you progress, as I've tried to shed some light on some things that I've done myself. And sometimes I'll bring up to you, and you've heard me say it more than once, that as a parent, as an individual, as a mentor, as a leader, that I see in myself, it's my responsibility to make sure that you get to where you need to be quicker than I did. It's my responsibility to make sure that you learn from my mistakes, or that I help you to not make the mistakes that I made, to help you down the right path that I saw the mistake at, and be able to tell you, don't do it that way, do it this way. This is my own little saying, and you've heard me say this before also, that an old fool can teach you something. You've heard me say that before?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, an old fool can teach you something, because he may not be educated, he may not be able to read, he may not be a whole lot of things, but if he's lived a life 2-3 times as long as you, he's seen things that you haven't seen yet. And even an old fool can teach you something, but you got to be willing to learn those things, to listen, and to take heed, and really, be able to kind of pick apart what you need and don't need, and what you can use and not use, and whether or not that person is legitimate in what they're saying. But you know, there are some things that you can't emulate any other way when it comes to life experience. Life experience is not in a book. Things that people have seen and gone through that's not in the book. Sometimes adults are looked at as fools, or us lecturing you as parents and that kind of a thing. And I say, hey, I'm not getting paid to lecture you. I'm not getting anything out of this other than wanting you to get there before I did, and hopefully learn something, and not have to go through the things that I went through, because wasting time is a hell of a thing. Once you start getting older, you realize how quickly life goes. So
For sure.
we've had those conversations. You're aware of them, but yeah.
Do you feel like everybody is a leader?
No, I mean, it's just like we were talking about a minute ago.
I have to disagree with you off top.
Okay.
I feel like everybody is a leader in their own way. Whether you, if you have little brothers and sisters and you're their leader, if you're in school and you're the leader of the classroom, or whatever the case may be, or if you're on a basketball team and you're the leader there, I think everybody has potential. I don't want to say potential. I want to say everybody has some type of leadership quality inside of them.
So here's where I'm gonna go. I don't like to be that individual who plays on people's words or who splits hairs. But if you ask me, do I think everyone has a potential to be a leader? My answer would be yes. Do I think everybody's a leader? My answer is no. And so those are two different things. And so I agree with you in that sense.
Gotcha.
You have a potential to be a leader to your sister. The question is, are you going to do that? Right?
Makes sense.
Me knowing you as an individual, yes. But there will be some people who are just on their own island and off to do their own thing, and leave the other person behind when they absolutely could have done something. So if we had more leaders, we'd be better off, right? If we have more people who took on that responsibility, we'd be a lot better off. But unfortunately, a lot of people are on their own island, and I think it's inbred in us on some level to think about ourselves, and you have to be taught on some level also to care about other people, and to look out for other people, and to look for positive things to do in life for someone other than just yourself. So that's all individual based to me.
Yeah. It's kind of off topic, but it just occurred to me. I was reading this book called The Way of the Superior Man. Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
So in this section in the book, it speaks about a man's finding his purpose, his purpose in life. And he explains the process of finding your purpose kind of like peeling back the skin of an onion, the layers of an onion. And I wanted just to get your thoughts and opinions on it, but I thought it was really interesting. He says to get to the core of what your purpose is in life, you have to be trying things. You have to be willing to take risk and try different things. So for me, in my case, I guess the first layer you can say is the closing line. Okay, I tried it. I went through it. I had a love for it, a passion, but maybe that wasn't it. So you peel off that layer and you go to the next layer. Okay, I'm doing this. Maybe that's not it, but it's helping me get to that core.
Right.
The podcast, I feel like I'm getting closer to my purpose.
Right.
Maybe this is it. I don't know, but you have to be willing to try things.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I 100% agree with it. I want to say that on some level I pride myself in being unique. And I don't mean unique in a way that, let me do something out there just so I can show I'm different than somebody else. I just think it's in me as an individual. And not unique that makes me any more special than anybody else, just my own individual and unique way. In the job that I do in law enforcement, it's kind of a more regimented style profession. A lot of times you'll hear them refer to it as paramilitaristic, because it aligns itself somewhat with the military. There's times when I run into some issues in the job that I work in, because I think outside the box. I'm an outside thinker when it comes to that kind of thing. Not that I'm better than anybody else. I just look at things and go, hey, This is broken. Why don't we do this? That's broken. It's an easy fix. Why don't we do that? Um, and it tends to be that they want you to fall in line a little bit more with the way things are typically done. And I don't mean that in the sense of, hey, we've always done it this way. We've always beat people. Let's continue beating people. I mean, I don't mean those type of things. I just mean that um, slow to change, if you will, in certain situations. A lot of the tradition is based on the job that we do and that kind of a thing. So as much as there's positivity in the job that I do and the fact that I get an enjoyment out of it, I still think that there's something to be found for me as an individual. It may be, a lot of times I feel like it'll be when I retire from law enforcement. Should I wait until then because life is not promised to us? No, but I think that I'll have more opportunity to do some other things once I retire. And I think there is additional purpose for me based on the way my mind thinks and the things that I do, because I can't fulfill all those things within the profession that I do now. It's a small side of who I am as a person, and enjoying and helping people and feeling like I can bring something to the career profession that I'm in. But you know, knowing your background and history, the clothing line purpose, I bought off on that. I still do. It's thought provoking. You know, what is your purpose as an individual? At 43 years old, I still find myself figuring out and learning who I am. Sometimes there's more times than not, or more times than more times that I have to admit than I would like to, where I've learned things beyond 40 that I thought I knew, or you know, should have known before 40. I've matured in a way beyond 40 that I didn't think I could when I already thought I was mature in my 30s. I'm not saying that I wasn't. It's just that, you know, you reach a certain level and you start to unfold things and you start to think about things a little differently. And as these memes we talked about, I saw one that made a reference, and I'm not saying it right, I'm sure, but if as a 40-year-old man you still think the way you were when you were in your 20s, there's something wrong. You know, so you know, I can be a little long-winded, but to answer your question, what do I think about that? Absolutely. You do need to figure out who you are as an individual, perspective, introspect. I've done some of the kind of the same things you've done. I've tried out several different business ventures, and sometimes I wind up figuring out I'm not going to do good in this because it may have made $1, but it didn't make me happy. You know, I may find something that doesn't make me $1, but it makes me happy. I mean, all that stuff depends on you as an individual and what business means to you. Some of the things that we talk about mean to you as an individual, and what makes it important to you. There's some people who are going to run a business who have no interest in taking any of those proceeds and going and helping anybody else out. And there's other people who are going to run a business, and a greater portion of their proceeds are going to be to help other individuals out. It just depends on who you are as an individual. So I don't know if I, you know, answered that.
You definitely did. Man, to kind of wrap it up, like I said, I wanted to bring you on here to share your perspective and let people get some insight from a human being that's in law enforcement. You know,
Right.
And to get that perspective, and hopefully, you know, after you guys listening to this, you can maybe operate through your daily life a little bit differently. But before we go, I always have my guests always give one piece of advice back to the audience. If you go ahead and think about it. But I just have to say thank you for coming on. I appreciate all the work that you do, you know, in my life and, you know, in your career path. And to me, it's honestly, it's a blessing to have you in my circle. And this is like real talk, not even just because we're recording. Because I know how I am as an individual. I'm real, like, I'm ready to go. Like, I want to do it. I want to do it now. I want to, you know, get after it. And I appreciate you having me. I appreciate you in my circle, because it's kind of like, it's almost like walking the dog. You know, when you walk in Blue, you're walking the dog and he's ready to go, but you got to tug him back a little bit and, you know, keep him, you know, in place from hurting himself, from running off, or whatever that is. It's just, I don't know. I can definitely appreciate that. You know, I have these conversations with you, and, you know, there's things that I've been wanting to do, or that I thought about doing,
Right.
and I have a conversation with you, and it just changes everything.
Right.
And like I said on the last podcast, there's some things that I wanted to do, and if I would have done those things, I wouldn't have been in a position now where I'm going to a place where I'm designing my own life in a
Right,
sense.
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
you have go ahead, you can speak on that if you want. And if you have one last piece of advice for the audience, I know you gave a lot to them, but we can just end it on that.
Yeah, I first and foremost want to thank you for having me on, and the kind words you've had about the conversations we've had. You made mention of me, mentoring to you a little bit, and I'm thankful and grateful if those things have sunk in, and there's some things that could have helped you out, over time. As an individual, what advice I would give, I would say don't be your own worst enemy. You're really the only person who can hold yourself back, and I speak about that through experience. I don't mind sharing with anybody. I told my kids plenty of times, you've heard me say it, that there's been times when I've been my own worst enemy, and I can admit that, even to this day sometimes. Procrastination kills. I've wasted some time in life through procrastination and other things. Hopefully, one of my new mottos is going to be procrastinate,
Right.
not procrastinate,
Okay.
right? And, you're your own worst enemy. You're the only person who can hold yourself back from what you want to do, and I truly believe that. There's going to be some roadblocks and some stumbles along the way, and people who are in your path. But at the end of the day, you're the only one truly who can hold yourself back from what you're doing. So don't procrastinate. Jump in with 2 feet to anything you believe in, because if you're half-stepping, that's the way life is going to be. You're just always going to be half-stepping, right? So, believe in yourself. Don't be in your own way. And just continue pushing forward and find a hustle.
There it
Find
is.
a hustle.
I appreciate you, man. Thank
All right,
you guys
Chris.
for listening. Catch y'all next week.